Yeah, it does feel like Halloween more than other things.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It just I can always feel it coming back to Halloween. Or I guess I'm anticipating it. I'm thinking about it, and then when it happens, it's more vivid.
Well, it's the air changing, isn't it? Getting
Yeah,
cold.
true.
Jumpers coming out.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Yeah,
Big blanket.
it is great, and I really like thinking about horror music and thinking about writing. So I tend to write this time of year, um, and we're going to play something, aren't we, in the end of the show?
Yes, we are.
Exciting.
So you'll tell us about that, will you?
Later, later.
Okay. Something to look forward to.
Yeah. So what's been going on?
Well, I've been writing a lot as well. It's just creative and exciting, and I've just had short stories kind of falling out of me. So that's exciting.
Great.
And what else? Oranges has been coming along nicely. Got lots of great writing on there, and we have an episode coming out soon actually that's going to feature some of the writers
It's exciting, that one.
reading their work. So
Yeah, I'm gonna really push the boat out technically, and well, all things are stepping up for this season 3.
woo!
Pretty amazing that we've done 2 seasons in just under a year. So yeah, I'm just thinking technically, and with my writing and my voice, and all things moving forward and stepping up. So yeah, that's going to be a big technical one for me because we've got like 5 writers. Yeah, wow, and they've all contributed vocals and read pieces that we're going to collage together in this interesting.
Yeah, it's time to mix things up, try new things, just stretch the format really. Why not?
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it, to just sort of experiment a bit and see how we can do things a little bit differently. So yeah, what's going on today?
Well, we're going to be talking about fear because it's that time of year. We've done a year, we've overcome some fears. I, for one, have definitely overcome my fear of talking
Ah,
more. When we started this, and when we did the radio show before this, it was really hard to just sit and talk into a mic. It might not sound hard, but if you try and do it, it is quite scary, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself to sound a certain way, be confident. And then when you listen back to it, it's like, oh, do I sound like that? Sound like a moron.
yeah, but that's not the case anymore, right? Like when you listen back to your voice now, after
Yeah, I'm more
a
comfortable
couple of years, you've had a
now
couple of
with
years,
it.
yeah.
So what about you? What fears have you overcome
Man,
through doing this?
through doing this specifically, doing the
Yeah.
show. Yeah, I mean the voice is definitely one that has been a big challenge. Um, yeah, it's just like it's different things with different episodes, right? Because I mean, I think the addiction in the arts episode was scary because I'm sort of revealing very, very personal things about my life and myself and like my addiction problems and everything. And like, I think when we live in a society that is very taboo against expressing certain emotions. It's really strange. I come from my family system was like that. But society's like that. It's like people don't want you to express yourself when you're angry. So yeah, there's still a part of me that when we do a challenging episode like that, where I get angry and upset and emotional, I am squirming, like thinking about it, like being shared publicly, because you know, it's raw, uh, and open and honest, and so it's scary sharing yourself, I guess, and just being willing to be vulnerable in front of an audience, can be can feel intimidating and strange. Um, but it's there's a certain type of catharsis, I think, once you break through the fear. You know, once you have done something that has been a challenge, and then it, especially when it goes well. I think the addiction in the arts episode was one of our best, our most well received, most highly downloaded episodes. And I think, like, you know, we were both nervous about it, and I think that being nervous about something is a good sign that you're doing the right thing, because you know, really, like, all acts of creativity and work are a mechanism for growth, really. So I think that was a good example for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you made about your fear of expressing certain emotions coming from childhood and, you know, your family system, because that's where those fears are really built into us. And I think I had a similar thing where I didn't feel like I could express negative emotions or what are perceived as negative emotions. And, you know, I think I was probably shamed for doing that. And so I felt like I always had to be happy and, you know, carefree. And that's what developed my people-pleasing mechanism, because I felt responsible for the emotions of the people around me. And so that's quite a big one. And that definitely factors into my fear of being vulnerable as well. But as you said, if you're creating, if you're putting your creative work out there, you have to be vulnerable. And I talk about this with Ellen, who I interviewed. That you'll be hearing a clip of that interview later. But it's so important to mine those fears and those vulnerabilities, because that's where the good stuff really is. Because, you know, we're all quite similar as human beings. We all have these dark parts of ourselves. And as an artist, you know, I feel like it's your responsibility to show the world those dark parts and have other people resonate with that and just remove that layer of shame. And I think that's what we definitely intended to do with the addiction episode, was to take the shame away, because that's really the root of addiction, and that's the cycle that you get stuck in with addiction, is feeling ashamed. So that's super important, I think, if you're an artist, and learning how to do that and being comfortable with the uncomfortable is what's going to lead you to the growth, as you said, and, you know, the truth, really. Because, yeah, I think using that as a marker of, like, oh, I'm nervous about this is vulnerable, I'm scared to put this out there, like, that's a good sign. And I think you need to recondition yourself, because we're all so conditioned to stay in this comfort zone, to find the comfort zone and just put out what, you know, things that we know are going to do well, or we know aren't too risky. You know, that's just the box that so many people are in. But if you have the courage to break out of that, it can lead to some real gold.
Yeah, that's always the good stuff. It's like the stuff that I'm nervous about, because there'll be, like, you know, composing and producing tracks is like, there'll be some that I won't be that nervous about. I'm still, like, super proud of them, and, like, you know, I'm really excited to share them. There's always, like, a couple in a batch that I'm really scared about. It's like Swan Song was one that I was really scared about, because I normally get people to do the final touches of the mastering. I didn't do that with that one. I did it myself, and that was scary, because it's like, it's just not something I'm used to doing. But it's amazing that the universe like sort of responds, because like on SoundCloud, that was one of that hit really well. I just totally wasn't expecting that, and it's almost like the universe has got our back, and it's just saying, "This, you're doing the right thing. Here's confirmation that you're doing the right thing." Like I just did. I just started doing vocals for my tracks. Right. I just finished my first vocal piece recently, and that was terrifying. And I'm really just listening to like what the universe is saying through other people, through experiences, and my voice kind of came up in a couple of conversations. People that I trust feeding back to me about my music. So it's like the signals were there. I think the addiction episode was another version of that story. It's like the signs were there. It just seemed like the right topic. It seemed like the right time. We seemed like the right people to do it. Yeah, trust is a big part of it. I think you got to trust that, like, it's the right thing for you to grow, because it is all about growth. So better focus on the things that you're not confident on to do than something that you've done 100 times, because it's just going to be way more engaging and interesting.
Well, just choosing to pursue any kind of artistic career, especially if you're doing it as your main career, doing it professionally, it does require a lot of trust and surrender and letting go of this idea that there is only one type of career path that you should be on, and it's society's plan. It's going to work for a company and climb a career ladder that many people have climbed before you, and getting those promotions, getting those pay rises, getting a mortgage, buying a house, having a child. It's society's script. And if you're choosing to be an artist of any kind, you're breaking out of that, and you're giving up this idea that you need to be held in the hands of something outside of your control, or like a company that's paying you a secure income at the same time every month. I know for a long time that that's what I thought I had to do. I didn't realize I had a choice. I thought I had to do what my parents did. I'm from a working class background, and work when I was growing up wasn't something that you did for enjoyment. It certainly wasn't something that had anything to do with what you were passionate about. It's just something you went to every day, and you sit at a desk and you type into a computer, and you do that for 8 hours, 5 days a week, and that's your life, and you get paid your income every month, and it's safe and it's familiar and it's repetitive, but that's just work. It's just a job, isn't it? I remember people used to say, oh, it's just a job, isn't it? You're not really meant to enjoy it. People would say that to me when I would complain about how miserable I was in these office jobs that I did. And so there's just this idea that like that's the only option. That's certainly how I felt for a long time. And I'd been conditioned to seek out that comfort zone of, just complete familiarity, just every day looking exactly the same. Because you need to pay the bills. That's something that my mum always used to say. It's like, oh, well, you need to pay the bills, don't you? So, and it's kind of like, okay, well, does that mean sacrificing my happiness then? Does that mean living a life with absolutely no passion in it? Does that mean living a life where I never actually get to feel alive, or, like I have a purpose? It's just, I'm just a cog in a machine. Because the companies that I was working for didn't give a shit about me. They didn't treat me like a human being. I was just a number. They don't care about my well-being. They don't care about my life. I'm just there to serve their vision. And it's just sad. It's just so sad when I look back on my life the way it was then, because I was just sort of living under a rock of obligation, of like, oh well, this is just what you do. This is what my parents did. This is what their parents did. And it's like, I'm not willing to carry that on anymore. If it means that I sometimes have to feel insecure about money, I don't care. Like, it's worth it if I get to live my passion. And I think for me, especially over the last few years, I've had to really recondition a lot of my beliefs around money and anxiety around money, because I have suffered really intense anxiety around running out of money or not having that secure, safe income. And so for me, that's a huge fear that I've had to overcome, and I've had to sort of recondition my nervous system to not completely freak out when I think of not having money. There's not that much support for artists out there. Like, it is harder to make money, I think, out of art, but it is possible, and people do it. And that's, another narrative that we need to rewrite.
Yeah, fear's an interesting topic. Maybe if people would like to, they could comment like on our social media, and you could tell us like what scares you. What are the things that you're scared of? Because fear is just essentially just a very human characteristic that we all experience. So the subject matter might differ somewhat, but essentially, like, we all experience fear. It's the reason that we have evolved and that we've managed to survive thousands of years. It's a very powerful drive towards us surviving, essentially, survival. So I think it'd be interesting to hear about it. It's interesting that we come back here because our first episode with David Creed, we talked about fear, and like he was writing or had just finished a film based around people's individual fears. It's always a fascinating subject. I think, for me, like, I've been doing a lot of work on like meditating on my own death, and just becoming like really calm and centered around the idea of like losing everything. Like a big thing for me over the last year or couple of years is a big theme in my development has been letting go of relationships, letting go of habits, letting go of material items, lots and lots of different things that at some point protected me, but essentially were kind of working against me. So I've just been really thinking about the idea of losing everything. I'm very lucky to have like one very close relationship. But I do have to sort of meditate on not even having that, and not even having my health, because that my parents all had terminal illness, and they had years and years of like agonizing pain before they died, and it was I looked after them, and like it was pretty brutal. So obviously going through that, you do tend to, at the time I was like terrified of like that happening, but like I think the more that you are able to like think about it and meditate on it, because this is a taboo subject. Anytime I in the past, that probably hanging around in the wrong circles, that I've talked about death, people just change the subject. Like, it's just super uncomfortable. Like, I've got a few memories of being at parties and like talking about death, and everyone just like changing the subject, going to bed. It's pretty funny, and I thought I was the weird person then. Like I was like, oh my god, I'm so intense. I shouldn't be talking about this stuff. But reflecting back on it now, it's like I can see that they've just got an issue, and it's like it was actually sort of, it's a good thing to talk about, you know. Like if we talked about it more, then we wouldn't be so afraid. It's like it's not actually scary. It's like yeah, it's actually kind of a beautiful thing. So you know, I've been sort of like spending a lot of time on my meditation, focusing in on what that would be like, you know, to die, but also to lose everything and everyone, and to be completely alone, and even have, because my grandmother had dementia, and Alzheimer's, right? So it's like she lost all her memories and everything, and like everyone's so scared of that, for example, right? It's like, oh well, who are you if you can't remember anything? It's like, you know, we are the consciousness of the universe, right? It's like that memories and the ego and identity are just like a vehicle, right? It's just a transitional characteristic that we use to facilitate our journey in this stage of our experience. Excuse me. So it's like it's okay to lose it. You know, in fact, it's actually part of the experience of life to lose it and to experience losing it, because it's like that's something that I've learned is letting go of things is freedom. It's development. It's the, you know, it's the realization of that you are not the attachment, but you are something else. It's like, you know, I think it's really a human thing to hang on to things, but it is fear that is making us do that, essentially. So when you let go of it, it's painful initially, because it's like you experience all this space and it's like there's nothing there, but it's very liberating once you get through that. You know, it's very uncomfortable, but once you get through the discomfort, you experience this type of liberation that is like really super powerful, and like it's just really grounding. And you know, I'm just very thankful that I've got very powerful spiritual practice that I do every day, combination of different techniques and meditations and stuff, and I'm really thankful for it, because it just really centers me, and like I can exist in a kind of safe space of peace. So yeah, I think, you know, I'm getting there. It's a journey.
It's quite a radical idea, isn't it? Confronting your own death. I don't think it's something that many people are comfortable, well, like you say, even talking about. So yeah, well done for doing that.
Thanks. I want to be free of it. You know, I want to be free of fear of it. Because if you can let go of fear, you can truly live. You can do anything, and it's like there's no like constant nagging of your voice in your head. It's just like you can just anything to get rid of that.
Yeah, I think as you get older, another, you know, great thing about getting old is that you shed a lot of that fear. You know, it gets cast off, and you become more free. And if you're an artist, you get to really, really like hone in on your craft and on your passion. We watched an interview with Kiefer Sutherland recently, and he said, you know, the great thing about getting old is that I get to do this work. I get to act in these really amazing roles, playing these characters, the same as I used to when I was younger, but now I get to do it without all of the fear that used to hold me back. You know, it used to give me those nerves and anxiety. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing, getting older. And, you know, that's another fear, I think, for a lot of people, isn't it? The fear of aging. But if you're following your passion, it really like offsets that fear, because the older you get, the better you get at your passion, the more of a master you become at whatever it is that you're doing. So it's just another reason to do creative stuff and really focus on what you're passionate about, and follow that path of passion and love, because you just building your capacity for love and creativity as you get older. Those things never age; they just grow. Same as with your consciousness, with the spiritual practice that you're doing. It's just more opportunity for growth of that practice and awareness and presence.
Yeah, getting older is great. I love it. It's so much better than like being a teenager or whatever in school. Like, oh, yeah, I love it. I'm like, yeah, I'm 40 next year, so like, so many people are like so scared about being older than 30. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Totally weird. Yeah, I mean, my music just gets better and better, and I just can't. Don't. I don't see how it will stop getting better because I'm getting more refined and I understand more about myself. I understand more about my music. So I'm a big supporter of aging. I think it's like kind of a beautiful experience, and I get a lot happier and a lot more capacity for love and enjoyment. So, shall we play our little? Are you ready?
What's that?
Well, you did an interview.
Oh yeah, I did do an interview.
Small interview.
I just wanted to say this quote actually
Okay.
by Georgia O'Keeffe, who is a real inspiration to me. She lived well into her 90s and she lived in New Mexico, and she just was amazing. Just lived life her own way, was so committed to her creative practice, really knew her value as well, in a time where women artists were really, marginalized in artistic industries. And she's still climbing up mountains when she's in her 80s, in New Mexico with her easel and her paintbrushes. So I have a quote from her here. "I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do."
Nice
So
one.
that was a good quote to illustrate what we're talking about here. So yeah, Ellen Huang is a writer of speculative fiction. She's based in America, in California, and she sat down with me to just chat about the work that she does. She really explores lots of different elements in her work, and she's been published hundreds of times. I mean, if you go on her website, which I'll link to in the description, you'll be able to see the breadth of work that she's put out there. So pretty amazing, but she fuses elements of horror, gothic horror, fantasy, mythology. She's really like rewriting mythology in a modern way, and her work is really progressive. She explores a lot of themes, including spiritual transformation, which we talk a bit about in the interview, self-acceptance, and progressive faith as well. She weaves her faith and her spirituality into what she does. So I hope you enjoy this. This is just a clip from the interview that we did. We'll be posting the full uncut interview over on our Patreon page. So if you want to subscribe to that, again, the link is down below in the description. Or if you wanted to just buy us a coffee, that's another nice gesture that you can do for us. So yeah, thank you for your support.
I still consider myself a religious and spiritual person. But I'm also on my own spiritual journey and learning new things still, and figuring out new things, I guess, for my characters. Um, yeah, there's a lot of spiritual journey that happens with, like, for me personally, I'm also queer, so I identify as a queer Christian, and there's a whole spiritual journey that I think comes with coming to terms with that yourself or learning about yourself. And I think some of that has come through in some of my stories. Like, there was this one fairy tale retelling that I wrote called Flesh and Blood, and that's a retelling of a grim fairy tale called The Nixie of the Mill Pond. And it deals with, well, the original fairy tale deals with making a deal to, like, sell your children to a Nixie. But in my retelling of it, there was this am I going to spoil it? It turns things around, and it does reference some darker themes, say, like, when you have a, I don't know, some childhood experiences that are, you're not as, you don't feel, you don't know who to trust or things like that. There's like recovery from child abuse and healing, and where do you go from that? And there's also the sense of, like, what if you're not who other people may perceive you as, or how you perceived yourself as, and what kind of things, is there a kind spiritual friend or guidance for you, and is there a way um, things can be revealed to you in a healing way? Like, is there something for you? There's I explore things with, like, the changeling myth in that one, and I think maybe that's one of my favorite things I've written. But then I've also read a lot of horror, and then there's a lot of spiritual journey and stuff in that too, where characters are contemplating when confronted with, like, I don't know. It depends on the story. There's different ones, but, like, when confronted with things like something forcing you to conform, or some sort of unknown, there's a lot of exploration of I don't know, the characters trying to find themselves, or trying to find out, like, what is authentic to them and what is false, and how to call out the false. So as of late, I write a lot of asexual horror. I'm writing an anthology of asexual horror, and the characters are asexual, but there's different explorations with that. There's them dealing with fate, or questioning fate, like, oh wait, am I fated to have a soulmate? Am I fated to, meet someone who's going to be with me lifelong? And then you're very intimate, and then you is what happens if I don't have one? What happens if I don't do all the things that I originally thought were how you live a, I guess, fruitful and giving or productive life? Um, and there's a lot of fear, I think, that comes from that in a real life experience with coming out asexual, and in questioning big things that you thought were always just meant to be, and maybe it's not meant to be, or maybe it's just meant to be in a different way. And then there's a lot of fear also, unfortunately, from other people with queer phobia. And I think I explore that, and I make light of it sometimes when I write a lot of this asexual horror. And they deal with big philosophical and spiritual questions sometimes. So yeah, there's
Wow,
that.
that sounds amazing. There's such a need for that, isn't there? Like marginalized experiences like asexuality and, like trans and non-binary stories. There's just such a need for that at the moment. As
Yeah.
more people come to terms with, like you say, going against what society's plan is for you, or what society's vision is, or, the traditional ways that relationships look.
Yeah. And I think there's also, like, for some of my stories, there's an element of, like, the misunderstood monster. And I think that's something confronting, like, queer phobia as well, where something that was initially really scary, like, maybe they're just, like, not actually, maybe they're more human than we realize. I do have a reimagining of Frankenstein that I recently finished. I think I'm just trying to figure out the perfect ending because I think I want to work more with the ending. But yeah, I have a reimagining of Frankenstein. I titled it A Romantic Frankenstein. Um, and it explores stuff like that. It got more philosophical than I expected. It questioned like where souls came from and all that stuff. But then there was also, and like, I don't know, did I just create new life or is all life just recycled? There was stuff like that. But then yeah, I think that was also like a big exploration of just like getting over fear as well and seeing yourself, and realizing there are, if you're realizing something for yourself and being scared of yourself sometimes because internalized queer phobia happens, realizing there's others like you. I think that's something big that came through in writing that story.
Well, it's the powerful thing about horror, isn't it? Is it allows you to confront those dark forces within yourself and, the monsters that are hiding down there, in the subconscious parts of the mind. So
Yeah.
do you think you call upon that when you're writing horror?
Call upon the my own demons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't tell the church that I summon demons, but yeah, I think so. I think a lot. I think that's probably why sometimes we are. That maybe that's also why we don't write every day. Sometimes I don't know. I mean, props to people who do. Props to you if you do. Sometimes it's a lot of emotional work too, instead of just surface imaginative work. Sometimes I remember like proofreading one of these horror stories, maybe two of them actually, that yeah, that I had finished or was hoping to finish, and I was proofreading them, and I actually even cried over what I was like, oh, I wrote that. Oh, that's a very real feeling. I went there. So yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of, I guess, existential crisis that comes through that you get to sort of manage more in writing horror, actually. Or there's a lot of, sometimes, let's say, like you're healing from trauma and you're trying to make sense of something that felt senseless. There's a lot of liberation in writing horror that maybe even if you just sought out to be cathartic and write something like on the surface that seems vengeful, there's something about like trying to seek peace within yourself when you're, I don't know, writing that. So yeah, I think there's some existential dread in some of my stories, and then there's also just exploration of like, well, why do we have these internalized fears? Let's bring them to the surface. Let's confront them. What do they look like? If they're outside of ourselves, what would they say? And are they truly, just out to get us, or is this speaking to something deeper? And I do write some stories where creatures are out to get us, but then like there is always something else going on there too, where whether they're your enemy or not, they help you learn something about yourself. So yeah, I think there's something, I guess something, I don't want to say I'm the only person, but like something I guess unique that I am doing with when I'm writing my horror is it's I mean, Ghostbusters isn't horror, it's comedy, but it's like different from Ghostbusters where all you do is like you vacuum up the ghost and it's in a vacuum now and you've like, okay, you've conquered it and you just clean up its slime and okay, yeah, we've conquered ghosts. We can do whatever we want. There's something colonial, I think, about that perspective anyway. I mean, I've laughed at Ghostbusters, but I think with my approach, there's more like this, the ghost isn't a completely other creature. In my understanding, the ghost in much of folklore is a person. It's like it's another person, it's another human, and you're going to be a ghost too in that lore anyway. So wouldn't you try to understand what happened to the person, or is the person you? Or is the person, that ghost is going to be you when you also want to be understood? I think that's something I explore in some of my stories too. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's a lot of processing going on, isn't it? I mean, I write quite personal stuff as well, and I've just written a sort of semi-autobiographical novel, and it's been hard sitting down to write it and confront all of that, confront those, past relationships. So what's your process then for, I mean, you mentioned that you don't write every day, neither do I, it would just be too much for me, I think. But what is your process like creatively?
That's a good question, actually. I don't think I have like a set organized way of doing it. I think usually I come up with a concept first. If it's not like already a myth or a fairy tale that I'm just that already gave me the plot, so then all I have to do is explore another what if of the plot. If it's something like if it's an idea that I don't really have an ending for yet, it's just the concept, I will write down the concept. And at some point, and it's, I don't know, an undefined point is whenever I hate to say whenever I feel like it, because I do think I should probably make myself feel like it more. But yeah, when I feel like it, then I sit down. I'm just like, okay, well, just write it out. Write out just the what if. Just explore the concept. And then go from there. And I don't even have the full plot like in my head most of the time. I'm just exploring the concept, and I improvise a story out of it. I don't think I've written an entire story all at once. It's more like I just get on there and I ramble a bit about the what if. I imagine for a bit. And then I just save it no matter how much it just feels like, okay, this is just an experiment. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. I would like it to go somewhere, but right now this is just not the draft that's going to go anywhere. And then I revisit it sometime later. I got to let it simmer. And then I might see something there. I might even cry over it. I'm like, oh, I put that thought into words. That is a real experience. Okay, I am going to ground that a little more. I'm actually going to explore that more. Yeah, I don't know if those are like really big things instead of a step-by-step process, but yeah, I think I just start with the concept first, and I surprise myself every time when the feelings come through it. I'm like in the flow, I guess. And I'm like, oh, wait, there are feelings in this. I can't just delete this. Let me see where this goes. Let me go deeper. So once I've given it emotions, I can't just like turn it off, I guess. So I have like a lot of stories that are still concepts right now. I mean, like they're written, just haven't, a lot of stories I'm working on the ending of, but they started on the page. It's just like, I am just going to write out the concept first and just have it there, and I'll probably rewrite it, and then I revisit it sometime later. I'm like, okay, no, there's something there. I can work with this.
Yeah, endings can be quite tricky, can't they?
Yeah,
I struggle with them too. What do you think makes a good ending?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I personally, I am a sucker for happy endings. I'm not going to say that's what defines a good ending. I know that's really weird coming from a horror writer as well, but I do like hopeful endings for me personally. I, even if it's not everything's solved, everything's happy, everything goes back to the way it was or whatever. I do like leaving readers with a bit of hope. Even if something is not resolved right now, that characters maybe are on the right path to fixing something or to reconciling, or even if a character dies, that there's hope that they are at peace. Or for me personally, I still like hinting at heaven and stuff like that. Hinting at love on the other side or reunion on the other side. But I don't like to get too preachy about it either. I don't, I'm not here writing a horror story to preach at people. But one of my stories does end with a hopeful note like that, where I don't define what the afterlife looks like, but I give hope for rest for a restless character, and that love carries on. The love that they tried so hard to maintain carries on. But as for in on a bigger scale, what makes a good ending, I think, is either some form of closure, some form of like everything I've read about that felt like in conflict can get some sort of answer, or if it's more of a, or if it's not like that, then something to really think about. I think I've read so many stories growing up where the way I described it as a kid is like, oh, that ending haunted me. And it wasn't even like a scary story. It's just like, oh wow, I I'm gonna be thinking about that. And I in my head I'd be like, I hope the characters are okay now, even though it's all fictional. But I'm like, that is really something to think about. And I think the reason why I like being left with something to think about is because a lot of times we paint fiction as merely escape, but it's not just that. A lot of it is holding up a mirror to the way we live our lives or relate to one another. And it's nice to have something to return back to the real world with, something like, I don't know, at some point in life, I might come across something that reminds me of a story I read, and I go like, oh, wow, I remember that ended this way. So I'm a little more empathetic now. I'm just like, how do I make sure it doesn't end that way? Or how do I make sure I, how do I say this? How do I make sure, like, anything that a story was being a cautionary tale about, how do I avoid creating more of that harm? And anything that's more of a hopeful and comforting story about, how do I go about creating that comfort for other people? So yeah, I like stories that leave you really something to think about if they're not a completely resolved ending. Something that makes you feel like the story is now in your hands. Where do you see something similar happening in your life? So how would you resolve it? I think that's what I like. If not the happy ending.
No, me too. I think having that balance of having some kind of closure, but also leaving it a little bit open, not answering all the questions. I think those are the hardest to write, but they're the most satisfying. It's much easier to just like write either a happy ending or like a cynical ending, I think.
Oh yeah. I personally just don't like cynical endings myself. I don't like being left depressed.
Who does?
But there's like, there is meaning in sad stories as well, because it does get you to empathize. And I like being left with the idea that no matter how dark story goes, we can, this sounds cheesy, make the world a better place with that knowledge, right. I suppose. Yeah, and I think that's something that I struggle with in writing these endings, not just resolving things that have been brought up, but I don't know, like, how do I leave this in a satisfying way? How do I, what feels like a way to make this meaningful? Yeah, I think that's something I am working on and still continue to learn about how to do with my stories.
Yeah, so exclusive piece. No one's heard it.
Juicy.
No one's heard it. It's fresh, and I haven't released it. I'm not going to release it. I thought we'd just do an exclusive play on the show. I'll talk about it a bit, and then you can download it right on the Patreon.
Yes.
So if you sign up, you can have a copy of it, and there's more music on the Patreon, right? There's a bunch of stuff.
Exclusive episodes. Another episode on fear, actually, fear of rejection. Oh wait, no, we've released that on the main.
Yeah, we released it.
Well, that's a taste of what is over there. But there's also stuff about perfectionism, which again I think is driven by fear. So it all it all dovetails nicely.
This word. Yeah, so we'll play out on this piece. It's essentially like a theme that I've created for a horror film that doesn't exist. And I'm really interested in the instrumentation and the sort of general atmosphere of like horror music. I do love film soundtrack music, obviously. um, and I'm really inspired by things like the Goblin, for the Dario Argento, Suspiria, yeah, and Halloween, the John Carpenter theme, it's classic. Obviously, we all know that. So, what makes a great horror theme? You tend to sort of like think about that, and what sort of textures. Essentially, I think the main component of any great horror theme is to channel the emotion into the piece. So, it's very like, it begins in a very, I think you described it as like the most grey sound you've ever heard, or something similar to that. So it's very atmospheric to that emotion. It's to the suspenseful, brooding. So the piano's in 5/4 timing. Excuse me. I think Halloween is in 5/4, right? So it's like, it's not essentially most modern music as in 4/4. We're very used to hearing things in 4s and 8s. So when you present something in 5, because it's one measure from 4, it has a certain effect which is disorientating, I think. So yeah, I used 5/4 timing. I used the piano, which is just a very blank, neutral tone, and also the organ, which just has that kind of religious creepiness to it. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to send us a comment if you feel like inspired to. And I hope you enjoy it. I think it's appropriate for the show. And yeah, thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this piece. And like we said, if you subscribe to the Patreon, you can download a high quality version of it. And you can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and what else? Buy us a coffee, I've mentioned that. Email us at pivotalslice@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, anything you want us to cover. We're here to help you grow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a community. We want to support each other in achieving our dream. That's the big message, really, is that we're all capable of having the life that we know that we want, and we can have it, and it's available to us, and it's right there, and we can all take it. We can all take that juicy apple and take a big bite, and just that fresh, sugary goodness of life. So let's do that.
Yes, please.